before when we restarted the server, all the data that we had created earlier was gone, right? But not anymore. Now, indeed, when we refresh the page, it is permanent. I can still fetch that same user that I just created before, right? It survives server restarts. So let's work on being able to update the user. Right now, that update is going to an array, right? But we want to replace that and go out to the database instead. So it's creating a put, right? It's creating a put to this URL, right? API user, which we can find on the server side, right here. There's the put that's handling that, right? If we go there, we'll need to replace this to be something that uses a database instead. So we're going to use the user model. We kind of call it an update user, which I guess we don't have. Let's write it first. Let's go to the model and let's implement this function. Update user, which should take as argument two things. One, the user ID, and the other one is user. Now I know that the user object actually includes the underscore ID in there, but usually it's good practice to make it explicit that these are two needed arguments, and then that I don't necessarily expect the user to have the underscore ID property in there. Right? You might be passing me only a subset of the properties that you want me to update. Yes? So it might not include the underscore ID property. So I'll expect it to be passed separately in a separate parameter. Okay? So we're going to return the promise. We're going to use the user model to do an update on an object whose underscore ID matches the user ID parameter that you're passing me as argument. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the value to be, actually let's write it like this. This is easier to read. There we go. Set to be whatever values you pass me to be changed. Okay. So if you're changing the username, I'll change the username, although we might want to stop that, right? Will only allow you to change only certain things, certain aspects. So we have that. So on the service, we can now use that update user. Doesn't see it yet. Why don't I see it? Update user. We're going to pass the user ID as a separate argument, the first one, and then the actual user object. And then here's where we provide a callback. This is a status information on if the user was able to update or not, and we're going to send back the status verbatim back to the client. We're going to say response dot send back the status. What if the user didn't exist and we didn't find the user? Right? Maybe there was an error or there's a timeout or something happened, and we'd like to send back an error. So the then function takes as arguments two arguments actually. The first one is the success function. Right? What to do if it's successful, right? And it passes to me a success status. The second argument is another function that will be invoked if something went wrong, right? If there was it was a timeout or something went wrong, right? And it'll pass me an error object. Now that's in the object-oriented world, but I need to report this in a HTTP world, right? And typically the way we report errors is through HTTP statuses, right? And there's a whole bunch of statuses that we could send back depending on the error codes that came back from the database. Right now, I'm only just going to report it as one big error, but you might want to provide a little more granular different statuses depending on what happened with the database. Yes? I'm only going to report it as a one single error. I'm going to send a status. I'm going to assume that the user was not found, right? The user that wasn't found. So I'll come back as a 404 saying, nope, that user does not exist. I can send the actual object as well. I can tie in and chain these together and actually send the entire error object back if the client wants to look at it and maybe display different user interface, different messages, and back to the user. Okay, the original error object. So if we restart this, we can update that user QWU and change perhaps the username big QW and DSA. Well, so let's do an update. It still gives me an error. It gives me worse, an internal server error. Let's see what complained about. If we click on this, user model, update user is not a function. Update user. Did I misspell it? User object, user model. Oh, we never added it to the user model instance. Okay. Computers are always right. It's always user error. Let's restart this. Let's restart that. So let's change this. Update. Okay, this time around it didn't complain. It came back saying there's the status, right? If we refresh the page, notice that indeed QWE and ASD is permanent. Even if I restart the server, right, and I refresh the page, it's still there, right? And if I go to Mongo, we'll see that the data is in there with the correct last name, first name, and whatnot. That makes sense? Okay. So there you go. We were able to create, we were able to update, and we were able to find a user by ID. One more thing would be being able to log in as this user. Right? If I want to log in as QWE. Oh, no, not register. Sorry. What is the password? I forget. For QWE, well, let's register. Let's log in as PO. If I go PO and say login, it found PO. It looks like it found PO. No, actually, it didn't. Right? It didn't find PO. Why did it let me go to profile? There's something wrong with my. Oh, okay, it came back with an undefined ID for the user, right? And so profile that can't distinguish between an undefined or an actual ID. So let's change the URL that identifies user by identity, by its credentials that passes username and password. So that's where is that? In our service, it's where? Let's see. Let's go to user services. It's probably it's this one, right? Find user. That checks to see if I have both username and password, it runs this for loop, right? Which we don't want to do that. Instead, we want to call user model. We wish there was a function that was called something like find user by maybe credentials, and we pass in the username and the password, username and password. And it would be ideal if this came back, right, with the actual user that matched, and we could just respond right here. Respond JSON the user that we just found, right? Or if we didn't find it, we would respond with a status. Send status 404. Nope, we didn't find that user. Or maybe even worse, like a 503 or like an unauthorized error. But let's stick to 404. And send back also the error message. Okay? What is it? This doesn't exist in the user model, so let's go back to the user model and implement it. Let's add it. So user, oops, not there. User model dot findByCredentials, and we'll implement it right here. That takes as argument username and password, right? And here we'll use a find, right, to try and retrieve that user. We say return user model dot find. Now, should we use find? Because find will return an array, right? But we know that the combination of username and password should be just one of these, right? Should only ever match to one single user. So might as well just use find one, right? It'll return just the first one, but ideally it'll be the one, right? And the filter will be that the username has to match the username. The username attribute property needs to match the username parameter that's being passed, and the password needs to match the password parameter. Yes? Okay. So let's restart. Let's try this again. So if we go back and refresh this, now let's try logging in as Po. And it didn't work. Let's put a breakpoint here. Let's make sure that we are following this. Let's put a breakpoint there. Let's restart the server. Let's go back. Po and Po. Log in. Okay, there it is. We're in the server. Let's step through this one at a time. We have username. Po and Po. Yep. Let's go in here. Let's step into findUserByCredentials. Okay, we're right there. User model, find one. Username, we have Po and Po. And that is in the database, right? Username Po and password Po. Okay. And that's going to come back. If it's successful, it should come back right here. Or as an error. Those are the only two possibilities. Either an error or it comes back with an object. So I'm going to say continue. Okay, it looks like it found something. Let's hover over user. Let's look at the variables. There's user. Looks like it's more than what we'd expect. It has quite a lot of metadata in there. The actual data is right here. There it is, password and username Po. Huh, so that looks like it's right. Let's see. Oh, there's a send 0 at the end. Okay. Notice that it used to be a return. Okay, I guess we forgot to do that return. We should just, let's stop this and let's do a return right here to make sure that it doesn't continue, right? Remember, these are all asynchronous. Right? It's asynchronous. It's not going to wait for this to come back. It's going to just fall through and send a 0, right? Not waiting for the server to come, for the database to come back. So we need to make sure that right here this returns. Make sure that this returns. Even this right here, right after this user model call, right? It should not continue. It should stop right there. Okay, just continue. Right? At some point, this will come back and respond with the JSON object. So let's restart that. I think we can remove this, remove that. Let's try to log in again with, go back, Po, log in, continue, and there's Po. Okay, and we should be able to update Po. Notice that this came back now with 200 and coming back with the entire object. So updates. If I log out and I log back in, Po, first name and last name have been updated. Yes? All right. Awesome. The only thing left to be done is maybe to unregister and remove the user.